All right. Boom! We're back. Squeeze the Neck podcast. Today I'm in London with my new mate, Stewart McGill. Thanks for doing this, Stewart.
Very, very welcome, sir. Welcome.
We've got speaking before. We've almost had a football episode before.
We can do an entire episode.
We'll do an entire episode on football.
Yep.
I didn't ask you which team you support, and we're not going to spoil it to the end. But I look forward to hearing it because I don't think it's going well considering where we are. But as I said, mate, my new mate, we got introduced by a mutual friend, Simon. Shout out, Simon. I hope you're well, mate. I know you're well. Saw you recently. Tell us who you are, mate, for anyone that doesn't know.
Stewart McGill, based down here in southeast London. I am the chief instructor of the Urban Krav Maga Association.
Mm-hmm. Krav Maga being Israeli martial art, I've touched on it a little bit myself.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll get into more. We'll touch on your sort of whole history and where you're from and all that kind of stuff, mate. But tell us about Urban Krav Maga. Tell us what you do.
I did Goju-Ryu karate for a while. I did various things, but Goju-Ryu karate was my style. Mm-hmm. And then towards the end of the 90s, right, I started to look into, I saw something advertised in the Krav Maga class, Krav Maga seminar over a weekend. Went to the weekend seminar, didn't necessarily like all the techniques, but I liked the attitude towards training, and I liked the way they were trying to achieve a simple and direct practicality, which you don't always get from Goju immediately, but we'll come on to that a little bit later, because that's a more complicated story. Lost my job in the early part of the 21st century, about 2003, and at the time Krav Maga was pretty big for all sorts of stupid reasons in the States after what happened in 2001, 9/11, and a terrible Jennifer Lopez movie called Enough. Krav Maga got a certain commercial success. Yeah. And I didn't want to get a job in the banking sector again because I hated it. Mm-hmm. I mean, and they wouldn't be to buy a place like this, I guess, but I couldn't stand it. So I wanted to take up teaching full time. And the Krav Maga option seemed the thing to go in for. So I did the instructor course. Only lasted a couple of years teaching in that Israeli system. I didn't like some of the techniques for reasons we'll probably go into later. They didn't really focus enough on the principles of leverage, which for me is key to martial arts. And you do Jiu Jitsu, so you'll understand that. So I basically broke away. Tried a couple of other organizations, and in the end, I was completely done with working with the Israelis. I also visited Israel and trained there, and was not particularly taken with the attitude of some of the Israelis towards the Palestinian or the Arab people. And that turned me into a bit of a campaigner for Palestinian rights, which, as you can imagine, as a Krav Maga teacher, was vaguely controversial. Wow. So we moved away, and I just wanted to work by myself. But I was approached by a few people who said, can we come and basically hook up with you? So I didn't plan any of this. It just kind of worked out that we did that. I started training with a guy called Leo Nagar at the time, former BJJ world champion 4 times over, and somebody with whom I still work. Leo and I started to do instructor courses, and we picked on the name Urban Krav Maga. We've kept ever since. If it were just me, I would probably have dropped the name. But because Krav Maga had got a certain cachet, and because other people were becoming instructors with it, we kept it. Partly I wish we dropped it and turned it into something else, because we have moved on quite a bit from that original Krav Maga concept. We're much more of a leverage based, and I guess if you want to look at this, it's a combination of boxing, Muay Thai, BJJ, Judo. Of course, BJJ and Judo are pretty similar. Jiu Jitsu, and some gypsy fighting techniques that my old man taught me, and some things that you pick up on the way in the rocky, rich tapestry of life. Yeah,
that's interesting, because I say, sorry to cut you off there, but it's like, I feel like I've been through sort of a similar sort of journey, if you like, through martial arts in terms of bits that work you like to use, right? Now, It's interesting because you say about Krav Maga is one of them, more than any other I've come across, where it comes down to a lot of who's teaching it versus the actual specific techniques itself. Whereas a jiu-jitsu class, as an example, if they teach you an armbar, of course, certain coaches are better than others, but an armbar is an armbar to a degree, right? Whereas I've worked with different bits and pieces, not deep into Krav Maga, but I've taught at some seminars and taught sort of stuff I do and whatnot. Shout out Krav Maga London, by the way. Claudius, I don't know, maybe you've come across him. Polish guy, good friend of mine, brown belt in jiu-jitsu as well. And some of his stuff, he's very much cuts the fat off the bone. There's no nonsense with him, do you know what I mean? Like, if it doesn't work, I won't speak for him, but it's like, if it doesn't work, he's not going to show you it, do you know what I mean? So that's what I really appreciate with certain things. And obviously, you see all kinds of things, especially now with the internet, you see certain martial arts when you kind of go like, You know, and look, that might work well in theory, but in practice, you know, I don't know. But let's go back a step further, mate, because like, where are you from originally, and how did you get into sort of martial arts?
And where I'm from originally is quite a complicated question. I spent a little bit of time as a kid. I was an army kid, so I spent a little bit of time in Scotland, where my father is Scottish, my mother is Irish, and we spent some time in Northern Ireland as a kid as well. And then we came over to England. Then through a complicated series of stories, we went back to the north of Ireland, and then settled here. All right, sometime around the mid-70s, and we.
Oh, you've been a long time then, 70s.
Oh
Jesus.
God, yeah. Then we mid-70s. Then we moved to Basingstoke, and then I have lived in London on and off since 1979, and so. I regard London as my home, but not so much London as more specifically South East London. You're from south of the border yourself.
Southwest London, yeah. We're the right side of the river, though. We're meeting in the middle.
I don't really regard you guys as proper South London, but yes, the right side. Yeah.
Right side of the river. I keep that bit in. We cut the rest.
That's it.
No, but like you came here. How old are you, mate? If you don't mind me asking.
I'm 65.
65, right? So 70s, you would have been, if my maths is correct, sort of coming of
15,
age.
16,
yeah. So that sort of time period. So in them days, like football's obviously big now anyway, which again we'll come on, not to make it too much about football, but like obviously that's before I came around. But when I was young in like South London, it's more boxing, karate, judo is what I'd heard of until I was older. Do you know what I mean? Like what was the landscape of martial arts when you was a kid?
Boxing. Boxing was always good. Again, if you do boxing, you spend a lot of time walking around with a sore face, so by no means for everybody. Certainly in the mid-70s, Kung Fu, now it depended where you were to a certain extent, but Kung Fu was on the uptick, yeah. And I mean, you went to some classes. Like, I started doing martial arts in 72 with judo, and it was noticeable after the Kung Fu TV series came out. You used to having maybe 10, 11 people there. Then martial arts became big, 30 or 40 people at the class. It became huge, yeah. And I tried various things around the time, and I never really was satisfied with any. I would say probably that from stand-up I would regard boxing as by far the best thing to do, closely followed by Muay Thai. And I wasn't really happy I'd found anything comprehensive till I started training with Chris Rowan in Goju-Ryu Karate, late 80s, early 90s. And I would say that was my core art and my base art, and it still is for reasons we can probably talk about a bit later.
Well, it's interesting you touched on two there, like judo and karate. I've recently dived into them quite heavily, like as obviously with a background in other stuff. But boxing was my first love. Now I come from an era of like, I don't know about an era, but for my mindset and everyone I knew that was in the boxing club that was actually carded up and was actually fighting, everyone was like, this is what we need. We don't need any of that other nonsense. You know what I mean? I remember like people talking about Jiu Jitsu. Didn't really know what it was because I was a teenager. But when someone said it at the time, I was of the mindset of, that's not going to work. I'll just punch him in the head type deal. Which I think was quite common and maybe still is to a degree. UFC might have sort of axed that a bit. But when you started, was you a bit sort of like stuck in your ways of karate, or was you always open-minded?
Oh, I think I was always open-minded. Yeah, I would always regard myself as primarily a stand-up fighter sort of guy, because I enjoy watching them more than anything else. But if you don't take the guy out early on with a couple of strikes, and there's no guarantee you will, all right, then it can end up on the floor. And I was always at various people I worked with in various stand-up arts, which I didn't really stick with for too long, partly because it was, well, just don't go to the ground. And, you know, you can't, if someone wants to take you to the ground. Then the UFC turned up, and that did begin to change the attitudes of people. And I used to talk to Chris sometimes about doing some stuff on there, because Chris had a Jiu Jitsu black belt as well, but it was more the traditional Jiu Jitsu stuff, and there wasn't much emphasis on the groundwork there. And it wasn't really until UFC that people started to think we need to do more in this. BJJ kicked off. Again, I trained with a few people. Didn't particularly like it, because you touched on this earlier on. I think with any system you do, right, it's 50% the teacher and 50% the style. Right. Maybe you can argue about the percentages, but I think the teacher is kind of fundamental. And I started training with Leo sometime, when did I start training with Leo? Sometime around 2005, 2006. Right. And I'd always thought with some of the people I worked with before, if I could do this, if I could bite the guy, I could gouge an eye, take out the nuts, all right, I'd be okay with this. Then you train with somebody who really knows what they're doing, and you realise that You're up against someone like that. No, that's all bollocks. The guy takes you to the floor. Remember the first time he took me down? It took me about 10 seconds to realise where the fuck I was.
Right.
Oh, am I okay to swear?
Do it, say what you like on him, mate.
Right,
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
okay, right.
Say what you like on him.
Yeah, and then by that time I just recovered from that one, and I've got a really sore arm. And he put me in various bits. Well, it doesn't matter if I'm able to do what I want against someone who knows what they're doing on the ground. I can't do what I want because they have proper control.
Yeah.
And I think control actually is a very important concept here. And I don't want to jump the gun at all, but certainly some of the issues I had with the Krav I was taught, now I'm sure Krav has moved on since then because we all have, it was reliant on punching power. Right. I remember taking a class when I was a recently qualified instructor. There was an American little girl there who was probably about 7 or 8 stone. And she's up against one of my guys, Trevor, Muay Thai fighter, about my height, so not tall, but about 16, 17 stone. And she was doing some traditional Krav thing where she controls a guy like that and she hits him in the head. And I said, if you hit him in the head, you're not going to make any impact on him because he's a professional fighter. All you will do is damage your knuckles and probably your wrist as well. So you can't make that sort of technique work against that. And that's whenever I started to think about, I need to change a little bit here. And I've trained with a few people. All right, some people, complete dicks who I don't want to mention, but they had a better idea of leverage in the system because they had a more jiu-jitsu stroke judo background.
Right. Well, you mentioned like Leo Nagel. I haven't had the pleasure to roll with Leo, but we spoke last week. So, Leo, if we can get this podcast together, mate, maybe we'll get a roll on too.
I'm going to speak to Leo tomorrow night.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, so
nice.
I'll remind him. Yeah,
that'd be good.
Get him on there.
That'd be good. Yeah, because everyone says when I started, there's a few names that come up like common. Like a few people say you got to get such and such on, and Leo was one of the sort of 3 or 4 that have been mentioned. I've had a couple of these black belts on and whatnot, and stuff like that. But from going through the time, the thing that always fascinates me a little bit with jiu-jitsu in England, especially, and other parts of the world, but here is like if you'd have asked someone when you started in 2005 about jiu-jitsu, I'm assuming most people didn't know what it was, let alone have somewhere to train. So, like, did you have much option outside of Leo, or was it more sort of that's your sort of one-shot stop?
Not too many.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Leo was just somebody one of my guys trained with, and I heard Leo was. I think Leo obviously has a very good reputation, and understandably so. Thing to remember with Leo is he's primarily, and he sees himself. I wouldn't want to talk for him, but I think you'll probably agree with this. As a valet tudo guy,
right. Okay.
And like a few people, he picked up the BJJ to help out with the valet tudo. But he sees himself as valet tudo.
Of course, yeah.
So I think he sees himself primarily as that, and that certainly does inform his teaching and makes it a little bit more, I don't know, realistic or applicable to real situations than some of the more traditional BJJ people. I'm not in any way going to diss any other system like BJJ or judo, right? But there are certain times when you don't want to do things which in the streets which are more applicable to the sporting environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that, and I think it's good. Both have benefits in terms of like certain aspects of say sport jiu-jitsu. There's obviously positions you put yourself in that are terrible, right? But I do believe there's an element of training it as pure jiu-jitsu for the sake of learning it correct. Do you see what I mean? So you can apply it. It's almost like another tool in your belt sort of thing when you go on. Like I like that learning. The martial art for the sake of the martial art, and then you can sort of apply it how you want. Because as we all know, like that's trained in various arts, there are a lot of things that you can just sort of cast aside for certain areas. But my brain has a conflict on that. Does that mean it's not worth learning in the first place? Do you see where I'm coming from?
Oh, absolutely, and it's definitely worth learning too.
Yeah.
I mean, you ain't going to use all the words you learn when you're learning a language, but at some point they can occasionally come in handy.
Right.
And you're better be able to express yourself and maybe get yourself out of situations the more articulate you are. And the same applies to something like Jiu-Jitsu and Judo. I may have started a metaphor, I can't complete here, but I'm going to give it a go. Like, I remember whenever you did with some of the so-called reality-based self-defense people, all right, they would teach some stuff on the ground, which was kind of okay. But not everything works. Life is not a straight line.
Right.
I mean, if things had gone to plan, I'd be sitting here talking to Beyonce Knowles, but here I am with you. Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
It's no problem at all, mate. No problem. Well, it is to a certain extent. But, things go wrong. Things go tits up. You can't get out of it. So you might have a plan. I'm going to get out of this, move on to the side, kick the guy away. The guy might not let you do that. So in that case, your priority might be get up as quickly as possible. But if you know how to stick an armbar on, all right, that can help immensely. So you do need to know the stuff, even though it might not be your go-to technique. And a lot of the reality-based self-defense stuff I remember doing didn't really have a plan B.
Right.
And I think that's what a good knowledge of the art can give you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And like certain arts, and we won't mention names because it sounds like you're putting them down. But there's certain times I've turned up at certain classes, and when you go like, this is theory, not practicality. They don't spar enough. There's a lot of sort of, we do this because my master, my sensei said so. And that kind of stuff I always found tough to deal with. You know, when you're in there, I think you have to spar is basically what I'm trying to say. And obviously anyone who's ever done any level of any art that's worth it, you have to spar, right? Because there's a bit of a trend sometimes of people saying train harder, not smarter, which there's elements of truth to that too. But I find that you got to understand what people are saying with that, right? Because to me, there's no getting away with the realism of it. Because if the first time me and you were ever in a live situation is when some scumbag tries to lift your wallet outside, your years of training probably ain't going to do you the best of, you know, the most favours. Do you know what I mean?
Oh God, yeah, I know a few people. Got one guy. He trained for a long time, karate guy, good guy. He was confronted by a couple of guys significantly smaller than him up in the West End. He was a big fucker. He basically handed over his laptop and he was in fucking tears afterwards. Yeah, but one thing he wasn't ready for was the sheer aggression of these two guys, the verbal aggression. If you do any sort of reality-based training, then I think it's important to prepare yourself for that. One thing we used to do, we would get people talking to each other, then somebody gets angry. Because it very seldom kicks off when you tap gloves and the guy just comes and whack it. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that competition fighting and real fighting differ in this because of the emotional mindset. Even if you're really wound up, you still go into competition, you touch gloves, and there are certain sets of rules there, and there's a certain respect for the guy you're up against there. You don't really get that in proper situations, so the emotion is different. Remember whenever Tyson fought Lennox Lewis a few years ago, and they had that punch up in the press conference. Yeah. And you got Tyson and Lewis, I think anybody with knowledge, two of the better heavyweights of all time. And they're throwing punches like pissed up guys on a Friday night. Yeah, so that's what can happen. Yeah, so we would try and prepare people in the class for the aggro, like start to abuse somebody, and there are various telltale signs whenever someone wants to go ahead and give you a punch in the gob. The language gets more obscene, it gets more staccato and clipped. People don't go, I say, sir, I find your views on Nietzsche wholly unsuitable. you fuck, you can't bat like that. Yeah. And so we would pick up on that sort of thing. So I think it's important to do that and to acclimatise people to dealing with extremely difficult and uncomfortable situations. And lucky enough, we can talk about this a bit more later, the vast majority of people are people who have got into confrontations, even after having trained for a relatively short time, have done okay.
Well, it's interesting. There are levels behind the technique as well, like what you're touching on there as well, isn't there? Like the being aggressive and going nuts for a short window, that can get you so far, can't it? In a real life scenario. Like when I'm training with some, obviously you've got to have the right training partners to do it. But we'll do things like we'll do sort of Jiu Jitsu, if you like, but we'll put on some MMA gloves and we'll be tapping each other in the head, poking at the eyes, sort of grabbing the just things that are irritant. Certain things. One of my training partners, he was very good at sort of blocking the mouth and the nose. And like, if he does that 3 or 4 times, that's a pain in the arse. And it does give you that, get off me. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like there is a benefit to that. But then again, I say, is it the way to do it all the time? And I go back and forth. I don't think there is a right answer. Do you know what I mean? I think there is an element of having to learn the right technique. And the sport stuff helps that a lot because you're learning it right. Do you see where I'm coming from? Does that sort of tie in with what you do?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I spend a lot of time on technical detail. Yeah. Because the more you train the technical detail, the more chance there is that you will do it under certain grim situations. Like, I see people come to me and they might have done shot the can for a few years, like many people did. Shot the can still is probably the biggest karate style in the UK. And you ask them to do something and they will still go back and do a good shot the can move like that. That sort of thing sticks in. And again, like anything else, like language, if you do it younger, it sticks in better. Yeah. But you can condition people. And again, conditioning is very important too. This is one thing that Leah was very big in, and indeed so am I. You probably saw some of the stuff that I put up and saw. A lot of it is conditioning stuff these days, and martial arts specific conditioning. Most fights are over relatively quickly if you can handle yourself. If they go on for more than about 15, 20 seconds, it comes to be very, very tiring. And you add the emotion in there as well. So if you got a little bit of conditioning and a little bit of strength behind your punches, because boiling it all down, and many people have made this point in different ways before, you can know all the stuff. You can be very conversant with all the stuff. But in the end of it, if you can hit somebody really hard around the head, you have a chance. Yeah. And I think that's something which, people do need to remember and acknowledge. Most fights will end in some way with someone taking a good shot in the head.
And at the end of the day, like what you're saying there, like the clues in the name, it is a fight. And I think a lot of the time with martial arts, a lot of people have not been in a real fight when there's no rules and when shit hits the fan sometimes. That in itself is a new experience. And like if the first time you've experienced that, it matters and you're in danger. Like you said, your friend the karate guy has done a lot of karate, but he handed over his laptop and starts crying. Like it's a different experience, right? And like when you go through these different martial arts, what you tend to notice is it's a personality, not so much the art that sort of rises to the top. Have you come across that?
Yeah, but we've had some people who have turned up in the class that I thought were incredibly gentle people. I thought, Christ, you're never going to get these guys wound up a little bit. And they have done the job quite quickly.
It's true.
I think
You
we all
across
have
it.
that anger inside of us. And to a certain extent, it's the fear of a situation which makes people like that do it, or some shit that's happened to them. Large number of people, particularly women, unfortunately, something grim has happened. But guys too. And there's a couple of guys who I mentioned I'll send you this later. It's a little sheet I did of all the guys that had, and women had used the stuff. One guy, civil servant, quite a senior civil servant. He lived down in New Cross, and he probably had some issues down there. I mean, not going to diss New Cross. It's an area I like, but there are some people there who were less nice than they could be. And he called me up about 2 o'clock in the fucking morning. Yeah, one of the features I do find, when someone does use the stuff, they feel the need to call me no matter what time of fucking day it is.
Airplane mode, mate, you got to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. He called up at 2. Oh, just to say, that aggression training you did was absolutely useful. What we used to do in those days was, because one of the problems you have, if you're the good guy, is you go into a situation and you're feeling just like you normally do. You're feeling good. The bad guys go into the situation feeling aggressive and wound up already. So you have to be able to turn the aggression on. So we would get people just walking nice and calmly, quietly around the studio. And I'd be playing maybe some nice music, like a little bit of Bach or Beethoven, getting people in a nice, serious frame of mind. Then I'd stick on Megadeth or Metallica, someone like that. Once you hear that music, your partner, the guy with the pad, your job is to find him and you beat the shit out of the pad. And you just go in there with extreme aggression for about 30 or 40 seconds. Then you go back into quiet mode. So it was all about getting you to go from peace into kill mode relatively quickly. Some people, all right, including my wife, can do so. Cut that bit out for fuck's sake. But some people can do so very readily. Yeah. Other people struggle with it. And the guy said, these guys came out, they confronted him outside the station, and he just went into kill mode. And he was a big fucker, awkward, all right, and he just took a couple of swings at them. They were probably so shocked the guy did this, they fucked off.
Right.
Another guy put a choke on somebody. He ran a little theatre club in Deptford. I know. I thought that you run a theatre club in Deptford, but the area is changing. And some guys came in, gave him a little bit of verbal, and he just got behind the guy, kicked the back of his knee, and put a very nice little choke on the guy. And the rest of the people, of course, were shocked, and they fucked off as well. So you can get the aggression into people, and there are various things you can do. Like, I used to work in sales management, and there were some people that would go into a difficult meeting, and they would stop the car a significant distance away from the company they were visiting, get a newspaper and batter the car with the newspaper 3 or 4 times when screaming, and that got them into sales mode there. So you can do various things to get the fight mode on, because not everyone has it. Some people go into it straight away. So we worked on some stuff like that. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does, because like it's a part that I don't think spoke about enough in martial arts, really. Do you know what I mean? And listen, personality plays a part too, right? Some people are naturally more aggressive than others. Some people are more gentle. Some people like blah blah blah. But I believe that you can train things into people. You know, like certain things people say like around athletes, you can't teach that. I think you can to a degree. I think it's hard to teach, and it's hard to sort of. It's easier to learn than teach, if that makes sense. Like people pick things up on your own, right? Like certain people. We've all sparred with people that have just got a certain something that you can't really put your finger on. They haven't been taught that. They've come in and they've got something about them. But it's almost like an endless map in your head that I don't think you'll ever figure out. You see where I'm coming from on that? Yeah, I think you can figure it out. I think everybody can be conditioned in a certain way, because I believe very much in the. What's the gut writer's name? Montaigne. I think he says if you understand yourself, you can understand the entirety of humanity, because we all have that. And people can seem very, very different. But
as a species, we wouldn't have survived. Because you think about humans, we are actually pretty feeble and ineffective in the face of most other animals out there are going to give us a good kicking. So we learned how to go ahead and resist and how to dominate the planet through making tools and so on. But we had to have that aggression in there. And also the instinct to understand that sometimes you have to get the fuck out of the way. The whole
sometimes get out of there.
Yeah. There are certain people, I say, like somebody sent me something a while ago of a huge guy, and he's knocking the fuck out of this bag. And he says, what would you do there? It's very simple. Yeah, I will run. All right. If I can't run, I will do whatever I can, all right, to pick up some weaponry at some point and take off that guy. You can't fight a beast. Yeah, because certain people, they hit you, then you go. Yeah, so I'll never say give up, because sometimes you got to fight back, but you have to acknowledge sometimes you need to get the fuck out of the way. Like, we teach a lot of anti-knife stuff, and we've had various people, thank God, use the stuff effectively against people with blades. But this is strictly last resort. If the guy has a knife and you don't have one, you are at a major disadvantage hand to hand, even if the guy doesn't know what to do with a knife. So it's very important to teach, get the fuck out the way. If you can pick up a chair, use it against a knife, throw things at the guy. But you can overcome. But you've got to be lucky and hope the other guy isn't any good. If the guy's any good with a blade, you're fucked.
You're in a bit of trouble. You could be in trouble. But I tell you what's interesting there. There's two things. We get to the conditioning in a minute, but also like the karate. There's various styles of karate, right? Now, I've recently started doing some Kyokushin karate. I'd like your opinion on styles, differences, and like, what's the best? I'm going to use that term as like, it's vague, right? Because what's best for what, right? But there's more effective and less effective, right? So like,
going to get me in fucking huge trouble here, mate. Now, I'm not going to say anyone is the best. I'd say from my experience, they all have good things about them.
Right.
And one thing, I'm glad you asked the question, because I want to talk about this. One thing I noted as I moved away from, say, regular Krav Maga and other reality-based self-defense stuff, and basically started to put together my own style based on what I knew. I should have done it a long time before. But more and more, I found myself teaching stuff which related back to various forms in karate. And you have to remember, and people like my friend Steve Rowe would acknowledge this, karate is a grappling art. Karate is a grappling art. A lot of the stuff with the punches and so on was put in a little bit later by Americans and by French people. Primarily a grappling art. And so a lot of the stand-up grappling stuff we teach, all right, as well as some of the step back and strike stuff we teach, I would get back to some of the very basic forms in karate. So I think that's an important thing to remember about karate. Goju is my style. Goju means hard and soft. And that's what I like about it. You got to think of Goju as well as primarily like old karate, but maybe Goju more than others, based on the Chinese system. It's basically monk fist and white crane. So there's an awful lot circular movements in there, some beautiful kata like tensho, where you do weird stuff like this, but actually does have quite a good couple of hard applications. So I know Goju the best, so I'm going to go ahead and say Goju. But Kaika Shinkai, some very, very strong, tough guys come out of there. When you look at some of the competitions they have in Japan now, it's like MMA. Right. Those guys get the stuff on. They still got the gis, but they get the helmets on. Right. And they're chucking in Muay Thai style kicks to the legs, and they're working like judo and BJJ guys on the floor. So I think it's important that you teach with somebody who preferably has had a couple of real fights in their life, and with somebody who is open-minded. Yeah, I personally wouldn't teach with somebody who only had experience of the one style. People that have tried a few other styles. I saw something about, when we talk about football, we can talk about this maybe, but you remember Roy Keane, 2002 in Saipan? I saw the movie a couple of nights ago on Amazon. In many ways, a crap movie, because you got Steve Coogan playing Mick McCarthy, he's about 5'8", and you see Roy Keane towering over him. This is bollocks. Mick McCarthy was a big lad, and Mick McCarthy was no soft fucker either. So he wouldn't have been shoved around.
Was he not? Yeah, okay.
Oh no, McCarthy famously committed more fouls than anybody else in the 1990 World Cup. McCarthy was a tough guy. And he wasn't anybody's sap. And the movie depicts it a little bit as a tough Roy Keane pushing down on McCarthy. Anyway, back to the plot. There's a bit where McCarthy in the movie says to Roy Keane, "But you know, Roy, I'm doing my best." And Keane says, "You should be thinking about how you can do it better. Whenever you think you know everything, whenever you think your art can deal with every situation, all right, or can give you the ability to deal with every situation, and you know the best way out of that situation for everybody, that's whenever you've stopped learning. And you have to keep on doing. The stuff I teach now, through various means is quite different from what I taught 10, 15 years ago. I'm still teaching in 5 years' time when I'm 70. It will probably be different as well. And you can learn quite a bit from students. Whenever you put students in certain situations, you see how they adapt, knowing what they know, the stuff that they put together. You got to keep your mind open to that. And when they come across and say to you, oh, we just thought of something here, don't dismiss it as students getting above themselves. Listen to what they say.
Yeah, it's interesting as well. It ties in a little bit with the conditioning because, like you mentioned there, in 5 years you'll be 70, right?
Yeah.
Now, conditioning at a certain point comes in. And I don't just mean conditioning like fitness. I know you know what I'm talking about in terms of like the hardness of your body, resistance to take a punch, leg kick, whatever it may be. It's big importance in martial arts, right? And again, that can be sort of lost where people sort of like act like technique's everything, which of course there's a crossover, right? In terms of you need some physicality. A 4-year-old boy with the most technique in the world is not going to beat a grown man who doesn't know anything, obvious, right? But like with conditioning, there's so many different opinions and people do things different ways. Some people think you should just do your martial arts. Some people think you should almost train like a bodybuilder. Most of the time it's somewhere in the middle. But like, what's your views on conditioning? And we call it conditioning because that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people as well.
Yeah. Interesting and big question. Personally, I'm not in bad shape for my age. All right, I work very hard at keeping myself in trim. I find it more difficult than I used to, right, to lose the pounds. When I was 30, I'd get down to 10 stone 7 very easy. I couldn't fucking do that now. But you have to, like anything else, get a certain balance. The weight training is very good as you get older because it builds up the calcium in your bones and that helps retard the entire aging process. You've got to be a little bit careful with your joints. That being said, I kind of stopped doing the heavy deadlifts when I was in my 40s because I thought it was putting too much strain on the knees and the back and so on. I'm back to that now.
I was going to say, I saw a video you doing that.
Yeah, I got back into that. There's a little gym around the corner which I discovered kind of by accident. And it's great because there's basically just old men go in there. Occasionally some younger people, but it's just basically old men playing 70s heavy metal. I'm in fucking heaven, mate. Yeah, and I'll pick up that. And again, the deadlift is the king of exercise. So just for general strength. What I discovered, because I think you have to mix it up a little bit. You do too much with the weight training in a particular way, you can build up your slow twitch fibers too much, and that slows you down. So I will mix things in with some plyometrics and with some of the weight training, which does tend to get the snap going. So you've got to mix it up a little bit. I'll show you a bit later. I love this compound with the kettlebells I'm doing right now because it does the entirety of the body. It gets you cut quite easily and it gets the puff going too. I found whenever I got back to regular weight training, I was neglecting the puff. So I was finding this compound more difficult than it should be because I was running out of breath halfway through. What I did notice with this particular compound, most people by the time they get to the fourth one, where you basically do the clean and the press like that, the grip is going. Because of the deadlift, my grip is really good, okay? And not just because of that, but I'm working the deadlift lately. Grip is good, forearms are good. And I remember years ago, Chris Rowan, who I trained with for a long time, Chris's grip, I mean, he had hands like stone and fingers like fucking nails. Chris grab you like this around the lub handles or grab there, you felt it. Yeah, so that was the bit he conditioned. Chris didn't do regular weight training. He would get this old-fashioned dumbbell, hold it like that, and just walk up and down the dojo in Santian style doing that. That was his weight training. Okay. Very, very beneficial. I can't do it. I never could do it. I can do it with a bit of assistance there. So you need to have a balance and you need to think about your needs as a martial artist. If you want to do bodybuilding, fine. Then you train a particular way. You will do 10 reps of a medium sort of weight and you build up the muscles. No problem with that. Also, but again, if you're going to go in the arch where you need a little bit of snap, you need to do the plyometric stuff as well, and you need to do stuff which increases your cardio. Yeah, and of course for jiu-jitsu, all right, and grappling arts, you need some stuff on the isometrics, just holding things out there, because isometrics, you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, of course, yes.
Yeah, so just holding the plate out like so. It's fucking boring, but sometimes you need just that where you are contracting the joint, but you're keeping yourself strong there. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely, yeah, because again, I agree with sort of more like train a human body to be a human body, right? I like to do a lot of gymnastics and stuff. Like I train handstands and I went through a period of learning how to do backflips and things like that. Yeah, I'm going to start doing some sprint training. Obviously I've sprinted before in my life, but like with a coach and whatever like that.
I'm sure for all that shit. I was quick when I was younger. I was very fucking quick. God, into my 40s, I was still the fastest guy running for the train. But now the knees go a little bit. I can still do most things. I can still kick, except with the left knee, which ain't too good. But now the sprinting ability goes. I went back and did a little bit of the the interval sprints. And whenever the weather started getting better, a couple of weeks ago, I used to do 30 seconds on, then take a break for 20 seconds, and then do 30 seconds again. Great way to start the day. Great for the cardio.
Yeah.
But no, I just can't fucking do it. No,
Yeah, I got you.
I could feel the hamstring going after halfway into the second one. I thought, no, I need to.
But that high intensity stuff will get you, like, it gets you, doesn't it? Like Paul Reed, I don't know if you know Paul Reed, MMA fighter. Shout out Paul Reed down in Bristol. I went down there and I did some sessions with him, and like, not to give away secrets, but we did the first one was very technical, like MMA based, very like, and it was brilliant. My mind was going nuts the rest of the day. The second day I toe up, and like, I'm not worried about a hard workout because the way it was the day before, right? First thing he does, stick me on an assault bike, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds, 8 times. Mate, I'll tell you what, I was dead. And as soon as I got off that, it was on the pads. Blah, blah, blah. You know, you go, mate, leave me alone for a second. Like, it was hard. But again, it goes back to what you're saying about like the reality of fighting. Sometimes you're going to be in that situation, aren't you? Sometimes you're going to feel that, and there's nowhere to hide. Like, I can't do my most athletic move when I feel like that. You know what I mean? I can't throw like a whatever, fill in the gap yourself. But like, I'm very sort of at that point. It was very like, all right, this jab's going to help me out here. This little step to the right is going to help, because I haven't got any ability to do anything else. And I think that is important too, because if you go into sort of like, what we call like old school, traditional martial arts, and I don't mean sort of like Kung Fu and stuff, I'm talking about, you know, your Judos, your Jiu Jitsu, there's a lot of conditioning aspects to the warm-up, and I believe in that. I believe in the traditional movement, or what would you call it, natural movements, maybe a better word than traditional. But, you know, the shrimps down the mat, I think a lot of modern schools now sometimes get away from that and think it's irrelevant, whereas I really believe in that. You know, when you're doing your judo classes and you're picking each other up and running down the mat with each other, I think there's a benefit to that. Are you sort of on board with that as well?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, some of the stuff we did back in the old days was fucking ridiculous, and many of us, I think, still suffer from various injuries there. But stuff like the shrimps and so on, picking people up and running, if it's somebody about your own size, you be careful of mismatches there.
Yeah.
So I still think does you hell of it. And it builds up a certain mental conditioning and a mental toughness too, which is just as important.
Yeah, I think so. I think I've got to come and have a session with you, man. We got to get a session in and sort of experience some of this, because I like the way your mindset is and stuff. But listen, I've held you off from football about as long as I can, so I won't ask you which team you support yet. But you said we talk a lot about football, so tell me, what's your history in football, mate?
Beg pardon?
What's your history in football?
My first football memory as a kid was Celtic winning the European Cup in 1967. My old man's from the East End of Glasgow. Not a particularly big football fan, but he was a big fan of Celtic, and didn't have a particularly favourable view of the other club in the west of the city. So I remember him screaming all the way through the game, and I remember saying to my mum, what's it going to be like if they lose? And she said, I don't even want to think about it. Yeah. And we had some guy came in, Irish guy came in the house, and he heard my dad scream, and he said, don't worry, Jock, I've had a word with the governor. He'd been to the wee chapel across the way. I had a little prayer for Celtic, and of course they won. So that was my first memory of football. And as a Celtic fan, it's been kind of downhill all the way since.
Oh, this ain't going well, is it? A Celtic fan? We started on a bad footing.
I'm normally a Celtic fan. I thought I would describe myself these days more a fan of football.
Yeah.
You ever have the probably haven't, it's a rather obscure guy, Uruguayan writer called Eduardo Galeano.
No.
Yeah, he's a leftist European, a leftist Uruguayan, big fan of football, as most people in Uruguay are. Yeah, I've been to Uruguay a couple of times, and if you're not into football, you ain't going to survive in Uruguay.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, and my son lived there for about 6-7 months as part of his Spanish course. Ooh. He has no interest in football whatsoever, which I'm perfectly happy with. But about 95% of Uruguayan conversation will be football based in one way or the other. Yeah, right. Once you get a cab. Yeah, I'm a fan of Nacional, which is the second, well, Peñarol and Nacional were the two big teams. Pretty much everybody has had a Peñarol or Nacional. And you get into conversations with cabbies quite quickly. The cabbies tend to be Peñarol, and once they find out you're a Nacional fan, it's okay, so I'm going to drop you at the nearest corner and get the fuck out of my cab. It's a bit of an exaggeration, yeah. So this is a nation which loves its football. Mm-hmm. And he wrote a great book, which I'll recommend you have a look at, called Football in Sun and Shadow, where he talks about mostly Latin American football. And he says, you get to the state in football where you become just basically a fan of the game and you long to see a goal. I was watching the Arsenal versus Sporting Lisbon tie last night. When I first came to England, the team I supported was Arsenal because my friends did. So I still had a certain feeling for Arsenal, but it's not the club, it's not the stadium, it's not the group of supporters which I used to know back in the 70s. So I don't particularly care about them that much anymore. But it's a game where I'm just thinking, God, somebody score. Somebody go ahead and do something like that. I turned on, the game was pretty dull. So I turned on Real Madrid versus Bayern Munich. And that was a terrific game. Yeah, and to a certain extent, I didn't really care who won. I'm glad Bayern, because Real Madrid fans are a bunch of fascist, racist bastards, so we're glad Bayern did the job. But it was a fantastic game, and both sides played really good football, so I enjoyed that. So I describe myself these days as more a general football fan than anything else.
That's interesting. You mentioned Bayern there. I was actually in Munich for Chelsea versus Munich in the Champions League. Yeah, right. I think it was September sort of time. But best stadium I've ever been to, best atmosphere, all that kind of stuff. And it's a weird one. Like, you know what it's like going to football. Fans are very segregated, right? Now, obviously, Chelsea had their own section out there, but it was a completely bizarre situation. Like, as you can go downstairs, there's Bayern fans there.
Yeah.
And there's no problem at all. Everything's like, the fans will drink together, the whole field. I think that's a German thing in general, like from people I spoke to that have been to other German away days.
It depends on the game, but
does it?
Yeah, generally speaking it is. Now, you'll get certain rivals in there. Like I used to, when we wrote the book, that we'll probably talk about and plug a little bit later.
Yeah, we'll plug that.
Yeah, I went to St. Pauli a couple of times. Now, St. Pauli is the big kind of anti-fascist left-wing side back up in Hamburg. They obviously have a bit of an issue with the SV Hamburg supporters. So that game, I couldn't make it because my son was ill, but my next door neighbour, who I co-wrote the book with, he went, and it was kicking off all over the place.
Was
it?
It
was like some major military crackdown there. Yeah, it was the first time they played for a long time, because St. Pauli are traditionally a second division side, and SV first division. But SV fell pretty bad, and so they played each other first time for ages, and yeah, the whole place was locked down, military all over the place. I went to see them play Hansa Rostock, who are an old East German team. And that's a city which has, for various reasons, become pretty racist over the years. And so they in St. Pauli do not get on. And that game was very, very tense. Yeah, St. Pauli have this thing where they like to think of themselves as a nice welcome opening club. And so they play the hymn of the other team, before the game. And I was chatting to Sven, the head of security, who's a supporter who's now become quite a senior guy in the club, and with a couple of our guys too. And my mate said, "So you're going to go ahead and play the Hansa?" And he said, "What, for fucking Hansa? No way we're playing their fucking tune." So the hatred does exist.
Yeah. Within itself, yeah.
That's it. And you get something like, I don't think Bayern in 1860 Munich play so much anymore, but I know a couple of Bayern fans, and they said it wouldn't be a particularly friendly game.
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting. When we went through, it's like a tunnel for the away fans, right, at the Bayern Munich ground, and there was Hamburg like stickers, like old-fashioned like little stickers everywhere. So I'm assuming, I don't know if they've got a rivalry or whether it's just the Hamburg fans like to sort of leave their mark when they go away, but that was like everywhere. And I don't mean like a couple of hundred, I mean thousands and thousands of
I think they're pretty big into sticker team. It's interesting because St. Pauli are big into that. So SV Hamburg, what's this term? It's called something like schismogenesis, where you develop a particular characteristic in opposition to the people that you don't like. So what's happened to a certain extent with Celtic and Rangers, because Celtic have got this quite left-wing pro-Palestinian reputation now, which never used to be the case whenever I was a kid, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And so Rangers have now developed this quite right-wing pro-Israel mentality. By no means all Rangers fans. Some of my friends follow Rangers would be watching this. I know it's not you guys, but there is that element in there. And so that's, Chelsea and Rangers have got some kind of setup.
Big affiliation, yeah.
West Ham and Lazio, because Lazio, right-wing team in Rome, bunch of fascists. Some West Ham fans pick up on that. Again, by no means all West Ham fans agree with that one there. So SV Hamburg, that's where most people in Hamburg would support in the 80s. They became more and more racist, and quite a few St. Pauli fans were Hamburg fans, but they got fed up listening to this Nazi bullshit in the stadium. So they moved across to St. Pauli, and they developed a particular culture. And the SV Hamburg culture is often in direct opposition to what they see as St. Pauli.
Were they already a team, though? Was it St. Pauli?
Yeah, St. Pauli.
They were already a team. They weren't a start-up team because of...
No. St. Pauli were because of the area. This is basically the Reeperbahn area. This is where the Beatles used to play. This is the Bohemian red light district of Hamburg.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and it used to be pretty damn rough. It still is to a certain extent, but it's now become a big tourist area. Where they give us a little tour of the red light area. That's something which I particularly liked, because I don't particularly approve of the way it's run, or in fact women having to do that. And there is a certain celebration of it which I found very peculiar. But that life is the way it is. It's a port city, it's part of the industry in there. But they have turned it into basically a theme park knocking shop.
Is that right? Have they? Yeah. I've never been to Hamburg. I've done Munich and Berlin. And I've always had good times in Germany. I like Germany a lot.
Hamburg is different. Hamburg's a big city. Don't go in the winter. Fuck, it's cold. I mean, Berlin can be cold enough, but my God, Hamburg was fucking freezing. So, yeah, go sometime in the spring. Interesting place. Check around St. Pauli. Yeah, like Hamburg, good variety of people. Probably the best Turkish food I've had anywhere has been top of the Old Kent Road and Hamburg.
Is that right? Hamburg.
Yeah, the Turkish food there was fucking excellent. Yeah, heavy Turkish population.
Is that right? Yeah.
Munich, I liked. I haven't been to the new Munich Stadium, Bayern Stadium.
It's unreal, it's brilliant.
Yeah, and Berlin, one of my favourite cities. A little bit like London. Berlin is a kind of big international city. It doesn't really feel like a German city the way London sometimes feels. Well, it's basically a big international place.
Yeah. I like, as I say, I've been out there a lot training and stuff, and I've always had good times in Germany. And plus, it's like I'm sure you have as well. When you travel sort of like to Thailand and America, like it's a big old deal training, isn't it? Like you got to go for at least a week more, really, and like it's drain on the system with the flight, all that kind of stuff. Not that it's a big deal, but it's a big commitment. Whereas you go like Holland, like you've done Amsterdam and like your Berlins and Munich. It's a quick trip there, mate. You could go for a weekend, really, couldn't you? Get a lot of good training in and pop back, and you're sort of back on your normal schedule. But like going from like football days back in the day, like obviously football's changed a lot as well, hasn't it? Like when you said like you was in the 70s, you saw football like the terrorist situation, everything was way different than what it is today, obviously, right? It goes without saying, just on a structural level, like people standing up and like it wasn't safe just from a physical point of view anyway. But like, what was it like back in the day? Was you on the terraces and all that business?
Oh yeah. It's fucking great laugh.
I was going to say,
the mentality to a certain extent, but I don't think I've ever enjoyed myself so much before or after. You need to move away from that, all right, but certainly as a kid, all right, it was fucking great fun. And that's why there's a documentary a while ago on Scottish TV about the ultra culture at low level Scottish football. Frankly, if I live in one of these small little Scottish towns, you want to go ahead and do something to liven up your weekend. I can see why the guys do this, and they're following with the masks, all getting dressed in black, all the pyro. Some of the real bullshit about the performative ultra culture, which is pretty much prevalent across European football. Hasn't got here so much, thank God. There's elements of it. But all right, it was a good laugh, and that's one thing the programme missed out on. They talk about the reasons of deprivation and so on, why young men do this, why they have to display masculinity. Yeah, all that. But it was a crack. Yeah. And one good thing about the 70s and the terraces, whenever you're there with 4-inch platform heels and 32-inch waists and you're fighting or running across the terraces, it does teach you a bit about balance and the importance of stability. Yeah, so my balance is still pretty good now. I put it down to that.
Put it down to the high heels, I got it.
Yeah, and the ability to cover yourself against flying darts and kung fu stars as well. And foul down 2p coins. So I enjoyed that time. Obviously, it had to end. And, there is this bit of a myth that it was only people that wanted to get involved got involved. No, that was bollocks. No, sometimes that major punch-ups would kick off in shopping centres, and all sorts of people who weren't involved in that were fucking terrified.
I bet. Because when you're standing up at football, like even like if you go to a football stadium now, it's obviously seated, right? Like, but if you're standing up somewhere, like we've all been to like non-league stadiums or dog tracks or whatever it may be over the course of time. Like, if you've got a lot of people in that area, forget the fighting. Even if it just starts swaying, that's hard to deal with, isn't it? And that can cause a lot of problems. If you're small, if you're a kid, if you're whatever. So the whole thing's a different environment now. And like when you're in that, like it's got to bring a different type of person to the game, right? Because the people that are going to the game back then, not all of them obviously, but I'm assuming most people that go to a game, they're a bit more up for it, right? Because you got to be sort of switched on. Whereas nowadays you can literally go and fall asleep in a stadium if you want to.
Fuck me, yeah, we'll talk about that later. Yeah, I missed the days of standing up from various points of view. I think violence in general, and a lot of martial artists don't agree with this because it affects their business, but when you look at the level of violence in society now compared to how it was in the mid-70s, it was much worse in those days. I mean, all the figures show for pretty much every country in the developed world, there's been a steady decline in violence over the years. Partly because it's an aging population, people have more stuff to do. Like these days, some of the people in the old days that would have gone out to the pub and get into a fight are sitting on the internet and swearing and ranting at people on there. So violent crime has generally gone down. We live in a less violent society. There's other sorts of crime which may be more prevalent, but it was certainly very much part of the culture in those days. And there was a tribal culture. You know, they came like this stupid thing about, say, Arsenal versus Tottenham. more like each other than they are anybody else, but they go out there and beat the shit out of each other. That's gone. It was encouraged by the fact that segregation was pretty limited in those days, so every time Arsenal and Tottenham played, there'd be a relatively small group of Tottenham would get in and kick the punch up. Tottenham would say, of course, that they took over the entire North Bank 6 or 7 times in a row, but it gets down to the definition of what is taken. But that was part of the culture, and people like... from your side, Eccles and one-armed Babs. You ever heard people talk about
of course,
them?
Yeah.
They were major celebrities. They were people that were talked about in reverent terms. Yeah, which is an interesting thing that I talk about in the book, because at the time, you had Babs at Chelsea and Tiny at Millwall, who were black guys who were pretty much in charge of the firms. Right. So at a time whenever society, and indeed football fans, were quite racist, you had some black guys who were quite prominent people.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if you know who Paul Canaville is.
Yeah.
Paul Canaville, first black player for Chelsea. He's been on the podcast. Shout out, Paul. Hope you're well, mate. And he
Good
like
player.
and he was talking about like certain situations and whatever that he'd heard on terraces at the time and stuff like that, and all, like the different culture. Like, go and watch the episode, by the way. But he's it's interesting to hear it, like, because obviously he experienced it firsthand. Right, so it's like it's all right saying it like and seeing it on a TV program and stuff like that, but when you listen to him speak, it's like, because it's not that long ago, is what I'm getting at. Do you know what I mean? We're not talking about something that happened during the war, are we? Like, he's probably similar age to you, I would imagine, Paul Canaville. So it's not like you're talking to a dinosaur, is it? You're sitting there talking to a man that experienced it, and like, I go football fairly regular now. Like, it's like a different game going to it now. But like, if you look at the difference of like football rivalries and things like that, like there are teams that really do dislike each other still, right? And like, Chelsea have got half a chance of knocking Tottenham down this season, which will be interesting to see if that happens, because I think it's the second last game of the season. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Tottenham are playing at Chelsea, and Tottenham are in a bit of trouble. So if Chelsea knock them down, that would be like a disaster. And I don't know how to take that one, how to ever get over that. But shout out to the boys.
Tottenham. I think everyone pretty much hates Tottenham. Sorry to Tottenham fans, but you know, if you're not a Tottenham fan, you hate Tottenham. They're probably the least popular side there.
Right. So Chelsea got a big rivalry with them anyway, and they Tottenham.
Oh yeah, Tottenham Chelsea always has been a big game. Tottenham Arsenal, big game. But you speak to Tottenham fans, they feel their Chelsea rivalry is
the big one.
Big. Yeah, if not bigger.
So if we send them down, I don't think that'll go down too well, but we'll see how it goes. But Chelsea are in a bit of a bad spot anyway, which we spoke about, managers and stuff like that. But we'll be all right. We'll pull it round. But like, I'll tell you one thing I wanted to ask you earlier is with the conditioning side of things. Like, how's a week look like for you, sort of typically? Take age out of it. I'm talking about like everything's feeling good, everything's right. Like balance of martial arts and conditioning. I don't think I asked you earlier. Like, what's your sort of views on that? Are you a twice a day man? Are you 3 times? How does it work?
It depends. Did twice a day yesterday, had a little bit of time, but again, you have to recognise your age to a certain extent and slow things down. But what I'm doing now is you got to change your program, your weight training program, every 6 weeks or 2 months. Otherwise, your body gets accustomed to it. So you need to shock the body, and the little shocks to the body are very important. So what I'm doing now is a 5-day-a-week program in the gym, where basically, excuse me, the fucking hay fever was kicking in. It's weight, beg your pardon, deadlifts. All right, variations on deadlifts 3 times a week. Yeah.
3 times. So a lot. That's a lot, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, for the deadlift is tough. I'm finding this quite difficult. I'm liking it, but I'll be glad when it's fucking over.
Right.
So it's basically deadlifts, regular deadlift, and you do the deficit. You know, the deadlifts where you get your feet together and you stand on the plate and do the deadlifts.
Yeah.
And then what I did a couple of days ago was you do basically 8 sets, 8 sets of 2. 8 sets of 2 of 180 kgs, all right, and that gets you fucking knackered after a while.
Right.
Then you do some upper body stuff in there. But that's all quite traditional weight training stuff, most of which is geared towards slow twitch fibers. So I'll do 2, maybe 3 times a week. I'll get the kettlebell compound in, or what I can still do, I get the medicine balls out, the old-fashioned medicine balls, standing push up there, balance on the balls, and do a slow push up after a plyometric push up. So I pull that together. I'll show you later on. Maybe I'll send a video. I'm not sure I can do it today because I'm fucking knackered. But yeah, I'll mix in like that. So that would be, at the moment, a relatively typical sort of week. The cardio I get from the compounds. I'll show you the compound later, and you'll notice that gets the cardio quite quickly. Yeah, I've never been a particular big fan for martial artists of doing the long runs, because it gets you there to a certain extent. If you're going to go in the ring fighting for 15 3-minute rounds, definitely you need to do it. But for martial artists, you need the anaerobic stuff. Quick, aggressive, short burst of energy. That's why I like the the speed interval training, or the sort of sprint interval training that way. I would still do that, but the knees and the hammies reject it.
They're not having it. But do you still train arts individually? Like you've done karate and judo and things like that. Do you still ever like make a conscious effort to go and train like a judo session?
No, not so much of these.
No, you don't. Right.
I'm 65, so I'm kind of semi-retired now. So hopefully I'll do a bit of training with Leo again sometime soon. I'll need to go ahead and do that. I haven't seen him for training for a long time. And I'll work out with students. So some of my students are pretty good. So I'll work out.
Is that right?
With them. Yeah.
And you said like 65, obviously. Like 65 is not a young man, but like 65 is not what it was when I was a kid, right?
Absolutely.
You see a man who's 65, it's a little hunched over man with a flat cap and like, you know, lucky to get up the stairs.
A couple of years, mate, probably, but
But you know what I mean? Like if you look after yourself, which you obviously do, like you know, you're still big, because that's another thing that goes fast with men, I notice. Like as they start to get older, they get the little shoulders and it starts to sort of go south.
No, your testosterone goes. So
right, but you still look strong, you still look like you can do things and stuff like that. Like it's different now than it used to be. Like how do you feel at sort of 65 compared to say, I don't know, what would you be coming out of a peak? 40, something like that?
Our peak would be late 20s, early 30s.
Really?
Yeah,
Younger
through
than
to
that,
the
you still
mid-30s.
Really?
Oh, yeah, because then you got one thing that goes, your puff goes a little bit. You can maintain the strength. That's why some of the best heavyweights have been great heavyweights well into the 30s. But you look at the lighter weights, the welterweights and so on, it tends to go down a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, because you can keep the strength, and the strength is important whenever you're a big guy. When you ain't that big, you need to work a little. You keep your speed going, right, and the puff does go. So, in terms of that, and also, I mean, I could get down to 10 stone 7 easy whenever I was in late 20s, early 30s. I wouldn't fucking do it now.
Right. What do you weigh now?
And I'm probably about 13 stone, something like that now. Yeah. So, and I could maybe do it, but it would
take too much out of you.
A lot of serious dehydration for that one. Yeah. So, no, I would regard my peak as around that. I'm stronger now than I was then, and I know more now than I was then. I know also how to pace myself a little bit better.
Right.
But I'd say most people would find some kind of physical peak, and maybe mental peak to late 20s, early 30s, because the injuries kick in. My knees are both pretty much.
That's quite young though, isn't it? Early 20s.
Late 20s.
Late 20s. I mean, it's quite early, like late 20s, early 30s. But it's quite young, I think. But you think that's the age?
Yeah. I think that's sort of age you're going to be about your peak, because you got the experience. You look at someone like, say, my favourite fighter, Marvin Hagler. I mean, he was 28 for about 5 years, but he was in his late 20s, early 30s. Yeah, the guy was at his best. So, I think that's your proper time. Everybody changes, but it depends on the injuries too. If you get a couple of injuries, like shoulder went quite early on. I got to nurse that today. Left knee, actually since I was about 15 or 16, the left knee has been a bit of a problem. Broke it and never really rested it properly over 50 fucking years. So that's always been a bit of an issue. I had a problem with it last summer, and I got the cortisone jab, and the guy did a little bit of a scan, and he says, I have no idea how you even walk on this knee. I think
it's proper mashed up.
Yeah, I think if you keep yourself fit, like apparently some rugby players, they're very strong guys, and they can have quite serious injuries with the ligaments around there.
Right.
But the strength of the entire structure keeps you going.
Keeps you together,
I think that's what Leo said to me a few years ago. If you're a martial artist and you retire, you die. And I think he may have something there.
There's something to that.
Doing the stuff. Yeah. Also, chatting to the late great Peter Constantine about this a while ago. It's not what we do, it's who we are. So when you stop, that's whenever you get an issue. But the football thing, I meant to raise this as well. One of the things that you remember from the 70s is the dynamic of fights, and particularly fights in a melee to a certain extent. Punches are exchanged, people get a little bit knackered, they back off, more insults gets exchanged, and then the whole thing kicks in again. So that dynamic of group fights is something which, again, you need to train for, and that's why you need to do the interval training.
Right,
Train yourself for the short, sharp bursts of energy, take a little break, a little bit more verbal, then back into it there, which is one of the reasons why I like the short, sharp bursts of energy training rather than the long runs. And the long runs are fucking boring as well. My God, I can never stand that.
I mean, as I said to you, my first real sport that I dived into martial arts wise was boxing, and that's like traditional, isn't it? You get up in the morning, you do your 5 miles and whatever. Yeah. And it is boring. Like, it's hard as well, but it is boring sometimes, isn't it? You know. But then again, as I get a bit older, I start to think: is there a mental aspect to that where you can kind of go into yourself? I think there has to be. In terms of you go into yourself, you think about things, because I've definitely had long runs, not that many, but sometimes where you kind of, it felt like I keyed into a lot mentally versus just the obviously thing what you're doing for your legs and your lungs and whatever else. And psychological, I think if you believe in your training, not necessarily it can be as bad as, it can be bad training, but in terms of it doesn't have to be the best training sometimes. I think if you believe in it, that'll carry you so far. And you see some people that do some mad stuff, but because they believe in it so much, it has the benefit they want it to, even if physically maybe it shouldn't. Do you know where I'm coming from with that?
Oh, God, yeah, the whole self-belief thing I haven't really touched on, but it's massive. There have been various studies that show that the fighters with the highest testosterone count before boxing, before the fight, tend to come out on top. Now, there's various reasons why that would be the case, but if you go in there, I remember the Holyfield versus Tyson fight, the first one. Holyfield wasn't really a heavyweight. He was a cruiserweight who became very, very good. And he's up against Tyson, who was supposedly the baddest guy on the planet. But once that fight began, I remember watching it in a pub full of boxing fans. Everyone turns around and goes, Holyfield's going to win this. You saw the self-belief in the guy's eyes and the self-belief in his body language. And once he came out there, you pretty much knew who was going to win that fight. Tyson picked up on that too. So Tyson was on the back foot physically and mentally for a large part of the fight. Also, I don't know if you remember this, whenever Tyson fought Spinks, Michael Spinks. Now, that was supposed to be a very even fight beforehand because Spinks had beaten an aging Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes, the best heavyweight of all time, in my humble opinion. Ooh. Oh, yeah, Larry Holmes was... he was unfortunate he came after Ali, but Larry Holmes at his peak was fucking unstoppable. That jab would put most people on the floor. Yeah. And in terms of getting up, when Ernie Shavers hit Larry Holmes with that punch, I thought... I'm watching it with my dad. We thought he's killed him. There's no way anybody could get up with that.
That's right. But he did, and he won.
And he won. Yeah, amazing. He actually said, if he hit me just a little bit less hard, it would have been fine because I'd have been knocked out. Yeah. But he hit me so hard, it shook me, and that woke me up. Yeah, so he hit me a little bit too hard. Yeah, so
that's interesting.
Yeah, so Larry Holmes, amazing guy. Yeah, but he was too old. He hadn't really taken Michael Spinks seriously either. All right, but Spinks, all right, was terrified at the start of the fight.
He was terrified.
Absolutely fucking terrified. Apparently he sent the bit boxing where you go in and the trainer goes in, he checks everyone's got the stuff. Yeah. Spinks' coach would go into the opposition and he'd say, hello, check the gloves. They go back in and say, Michael, that guy is terrified. You're going to beat the crap out of the guy. You've won this fight. He goes into Tyson's room. Tyson is punching holes in the fucking ball. His trainer comes back in and says, Michael, good luck out there.
That was Butch Lewis, that guy.
That's it, yeah. So, right, Spinks goes in and says, fucking hell. Understandably so. I'm not dissing the guy. He's a great fighter, but... Tyson at that time was a very worrying fighter. Yeah.
And what's funny about that, which people don't mention enough, I think, at that time of that fight, Tyson hadn't even turned 22 yet. Yeah. Like, he was a baby, really, like in the grand scheme of things. And like you said, you think, in your opinion, Larry Holmes was the greatest heavyweight of all time. I think he's way up there. My opinion is Tyson at his peak for a very short window in terms of that time. You know, like the window when he was beating your Michael Spinks of the world, when he was training right, when he had the right people around him before he sort of got Don King'd up, if you like.
I think he had a short time in which he was by far the best fighter in the world. But and again, I wouldn't diss Tyson in any way because hell, he might find out.
He's still about,
the guy's still fucking useful. I would say that there are very few fighters he beat that you would go ahead and put in the very top echelons at their peak. Pinkland Thomas was probably the best fighter he fought around that time, and he did beat him well. The Bone Crusher just held on for he was fucking terrified.
Right.
Yeah, but when you look at Tyson's overall record, he always struggled again with the stamina, even whenever he was good. Do you remember a guy called James Quick Tillis?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and he took Tyson to 12 rounds, and he gave him one hell of a fight. Yeah, because he was a big, tough old fucker, and he knew how to manage a fight. So that was taken to the rounds. Once Tyson got beyond the first few rounds, the stamina went a little bit, and I think that always affected him. And also, after he basically left people like Teddy Atlas, who was an amazing boxing coach. Anytime I see Atlas commenting on something, I learn a little bit about the game.
Right.
Very good. Once he left Atlas and D'Amato, I don't think he ever really got any good coaching. You remember the first fight against Bruno? those guys in his corner didn't know what the fuck they were talking about.
No, that's right.
And I think you do need a decent corner no matter how good you are.
And there's the famous clip of him in the corner when he's fighting Buster Douglas, right? Where the guy's got like the blown up, you know what I'm talking about, the glove with like water in it. He hasn't got a proper compress for his eye. He's got like a blown up glove hanging out. Like, and it's just a mess. It's just like, he's by himself at this point, isn't he? You know what I mean? He's just going off of instinct. He's not really training. And the guy's in the corner at a world title fight at that level to not even have the proper equipment in the corner. You know, it lets you know what kind of environment he's in, isn't it? But I think it was interesting when you say that about the historic heavyweight. I like talking about like the old time fighters, and I think there's certain people don't get enough credit and whatnot like that. There were two, but one of the ones in particular I think never will ever get the love he did is Sonny Liston from his day. Like, I'm a big fan of Sonny Liston. I think Sonny Liston was like a tremendous fighter. He gets overlooked because he lost to Ali twice and in the fashion he lost, but I don't know, like there's rumours that there was something squirrely going on in that fight as well.
Oh, clearly there was. Yeah,
of course
the
there was.
second fight in particular, the idea that punch hit him is just absurd.
But also the first fight as well, what I find interesting is like people, if you listen to people talk about it that think they know what they're talking about, they go, oh, Ali like completely danced him on his head. If you watch that fight was nothing in it. Until, for no apparent reason, Sonny Liston doesn't get off the stool.
He said his shoulder hurt.
Right, but when you watch the fight, it's like, what's going on? If you actually watch what's going on, it's a weird one. Now, I'm not saying there was something squirrely. I don't know. What do I know, right?
No,
happened 30 odd years before I was born. But like, you know where I'm coming from. There's something strange there going on.
I think a lot of people made a lot of money from both those fights.
Right.
Yeah, and boxing does have a history of that. I'm sure it's still there today, but maybe because boxing is less prominent, or it doesn't happen quite so often. But the mob was definitely into that. And Liston, Liston had beaten the crap out of everybody, including some good fighters. And again, you look at Ali. Ali today would probably be a cruiserweight.
You could definitely make it if you wanted to.
Yeah. Well, you see the size of heavyweights these days. You'd probably be better off down there at cruiserweight. Liston, proper heavyweight. It's a bit like George Foreman. George Foreman had the reputation of Liston a few years later. But
they trained together, didn't they? He sparred a lot with Liston, George Foreman.
There's a lot of interesting stuff about Sonny Liston now. He was a very difficult, complicated character. Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits has written a song about him. I'll send you some links about the guy because he was a more complicated figure.
Very complicated. Died under strange circumstances too, didn't he?
I think he was shooting up a little bit and somebody, I'm not sure what it was, but nobody will ever know. He went to Scotland and was very, very popular. There's a picture of him dressed up in proper Scottish gear with a big smile on his face. So an interesting, complicated character. But no, I'm with you. Liston's a way underrated fighter. It's a shame he's remembered for those two strange competitions with Ali.
He's had, and I've said this on here before if I'm boring people, but he had weird dimensions too. I think he's still got the longest reach ever in heavyweight history, despite only being 6'1". He's got the biggest fists ever in like some strange dimensions.
Were his fists bigger than Foreman's? Because Foreman's
he had bigger fists than Foreman. He had the biggest fists in history of any heavyweight. You know.
Really?
Amazing sort of like thing. Because I've said it before. My granddad saw him live in the UK. He did like exhibitions at the Royal Albert Hall. And he said, like, looking at him at the time, it was like, no one's ever going to beat that guy. He's completely different to it. And like, you look at the Floyd Patterson fights, no. But the other one as well, I think, doesn't get his just due. And I know he was undefeated, but it's Rocky Marciano. I think Rocky Marciano was a tremendous fighter in his day.
Rocky is interesting in that when you look again at the people he fought, he was a very, very well-managed fighter. He didn't take on many people who were at their peak at the time. So to a certain extent, his reputation is clouded by that. He also... he's an Italian guy fighting at a time whenever the...
What do you mean? Where are you getting at?
I know. Apologies to any Italians here, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, he's fighting at a time whenever the mob were big into the game.
Huge,
What I do find interesting about Rocky is, again, he's somebody who'd be a cruiserweight, maybe a light heavyweight.
Oh, God, easy.
But he fought a clever fight. When you look at his fights, he kept himself nice and low, and he kept on throwing the uppercuts, to the underside of the guy's arm here. And he had great cardio. He kept on going. But he came in there and weakened the guy, so eventually it would drop and come in that way. So he was a clever fighter who was very well managed.
That's why I like him a lot, is because I think he knew exactly what he was in terms of, like, he had extremely short arms. Like, Rocky Marciano, I believe, was 5'11". He had a 68-inch reach, which is like that of a lightweight, really. You know what I mean? Like, reach-wise, I'm talking about. He was like a T-Rex sort of thing. But he had to make it work for him. He wasn't, do you know what I mean? He couldn't jab and move and pick and poke. He also started boxing, I think, at 21 or something crazy. You know what I mean? He had like limited amateur experience and turned pro. So that's why I like him, because like if you watch his training videos, some of it's almost like a joke. Like you look at it and he's like walloping the bag, doesn't do much. He's doing some weird, he can't really skip properly. But it's like hard work. Do you know what I mean? He's getting on with it, and like obviously he made it. He worked for him, so he's one I appreciate and I like to watch.
It's interesting you mentioned skipping there because even though I can't stand the guy, Floyd Mayweather is one of the best. Do you want to close that door, mate? We got the garbage noise out there.
That's right, mate.
Yeah, you're okay. Yeah, all right, cool.
Mate.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I saw some documentary about Mayweather years ago. All right, and before he became a real big fighter, and they showed him skipping, and I thought, fucking hell, because skipping's always come tough to me. I hate skipping. Okay. Yeah, I remember before Muay Thai, we had to skip for about 20, 25 minutes. Fucking hate it. I can see why they did it, but fucking hated it, yeah. So seeing Mayweather, I thought that guy is going to be one hell of a fighter. And of course he is, I would say, up there with the top three.
Would you say that high?
Yeah, because Mayweather is just very good at winning boxing matches.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he might not be the most exciting fighter to watch, but in terms of his defence, his head movement and everything.
Coming back as well, wasn't he, at the age of 49 or whatever?
Yeah, they all come back and they all fucking fit. I remember when Sugar Ray came back. Yeah, you just can't keep it going. Could be wrong in Mayweather's case there. I mean, incredibly fit guys. Well, I mean, he would fight 12 3-minute rounds in training one after the other.
Yeah, no
Pretty
problem.
fucking spectacular.
Yeah. Well, here's an interesting question. You mentioned like heavyweight Larry Holmes. Like, who do you think's the best pound for pound boxer of all time?
Jay. That's a really fucking tough one.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. I've stuck it on you there, mate.
If you put a gun to my head, all right, I would say because he dominated for a few years and because he always fought at a weight which was tough for him to reach, but his discipline was astonishing, and he fought everybody. I would say Marvin Hagler.
Yep.
I think if he hadn't lost that last fight to Sugar Ray,
I don't think he did lose it, to be honest with you.
I'm glad you said that, yeah, because I remember at the time I was so upset. Me and my mate Tony, we threw sickies. I couldn't go into work. I was so pissed off with the fight afterwards. Yeah, and had he been fighting anybody but Sugar Ray, all right, then he would have got that decision.
I think he won it.
Don't get me wrong. Sugar Ray was great, but he won that fight. And again, given the way American judges tend to judge, he definitely would have won that fight if he hadn't been fighting Sugar Ray.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say Hagler.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but Sugar Ray is somewhere up there as well.
Oh, you don't like Sugar Ray? You're not a fan of Sugar Ray?
No, there's too much God. The way, whenever he took on Dave Boy Green, he didn't need to do all that fucking posing and posturing against the guy he was going to beat anyway. Yeah, I didn't particularly like the way he did that. Don Curry for a while in the 80s was an incredible.
He gets forgotten, doesn't he?
fighter.
People don't speak about him enough.
Yeah, he had problems with the weight, and he just got down, and he was beaten by a couple of people that he shouldn't have got beaten by. So yeah, Don Curry was a fantastic fighter for a while. Scotland, Ken Buchanan. Ken Buchanan, all right, was a very, very good fighter.
Yeah.
When if Duran is asked, your toughest fight, he says straight away, Ken Buchanan.
I've said that before. I've mentioned it. I don't know if you know Frank Gilfeather. You heard of Frank Gilfeather? He's been on a couple of times. Shout out Frank. He trained with Ken Buchanan and he was telling how great he was. And I brought that up as well. I've heard Duran say that he was the toughest fighter.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you watch the fight, I mean, Buchanan's still bitter about it until his dying day because he took that low one. Yeah. But he kept on going. But that is one of the great fights that you will ever see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So... God, it's tough. It's a real tough question. But gun to the head, I would say Marvin Hagler.
Would you? Marvin Hagler's way up there for me. I think Marvin Hagler's a great fighter. My pick, for what it's worth, is Roy Jones Jr. I think in his day was outrageous fighter, And also people don't talk about it. He fought out of his weight all of his career. Yeah. Like I was lucky enough to do a seminar with him recently. I've met him a couple of times at things. Is how small he is. He's like essentially he's a similar sort of frame to me. Like in terms of someone who fought a heavyweight, it's ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like he went through all the weights. He was fighting a light heavyweight for the vast majority of his career. Which, if you're around a lot of light heavyweights, he's undersized for that.
Yeah.
And it's like I just think he was a phenomenal fighter.
I think if he just stuck to middleweight, you say Roy Jones Jr. would be way up there. Yeah, but like a bit like Tommy Hearns, fantastic fighter. Went up the weights. Yeah. I mean, Tommy Hearns always had a welterweight's legs, though. That was part of the problem.
He was a very strange build, wasn't he? Very light and long.
He had plenty of power in there.
The knockout against Duran. Like you mentioned Duran earlier. Like, that's crazy.
And the way Duran went down with that one, that was fucking astonishing. But again, Duran is a contender.
Duran's a big contender, I think.
because the guy was fucking amazing for a few years, and he didn't train properly for that second fight against Leonard. Right. He was up there. He's one of those guys like Ricky Hatton who was ballooning between fights. They agreed to that fight way too early, and he just wasn't ready for it. But people forget, after that, he came back and he had a very successful career, after that defeat against Leonard. The problem with Duran is he seems to be defined by the whole no mask thing, which was very atypical. Yeah. But he showed some proper cojones and came back like hell afterwards. So,
and he went on. I don't think he retired till he was about 50, did he? He went up the weights even further. He was crazy animal.
Yeah, he became quite, again, don't tell him I said, so he became a little bit, shall we say, thicker around the waist afterwards. But again, the guy could take a punch, and the guy had a ferocity, which was pretty much unmatched in there. Yeah, I think Duran's one of those guys too. You think because of his mental attitude in the street, all right, he'd give anybody one hell of a go. Proper. Yeah, despite the fucking, there's been people having grappling abilities and so on, he would not give in. No. He would fight until the very end. You'd have to kill him. Yeah.
Well, he had a very hard life, didn't he? I think he was like selling donuts on the street in Panama when he was like 5 or something. Do you know
Panama City is one hell of a tough place. If you ever go to Panama City, this is a few years ago, but they have basically cops around the city centre, and if you're not from the area, they know, and they tell you don't go there, you will be robbed. Yeah, so they basically stop you from leaving that city centre bit. It's probably different now, but Panama City is a tough place,
That's mad, All right, last fight question. I'll leave you alone before we get on to the most important question of the day. British fighter. Who's the best British fighter you've seen?
God, again, a fucking huge question. I'll put Ken Buchanan way up.
Do you? Yeah, still, yeah.
Ken Buchanan just had that couple of years in a tough division. And I mean, watch the fight against Duran. It's just an amazing piece of work.
It is,
Yeah, that's one of the best fights ever. God, it's tough. I got to say, all right, because you could say there's a case for saying that he is the top heavyweight of all time, just in terms of size, heaviness of punch. Lennox Lewis was an amazing fighter. You see the size of the guy. Yeah. He's a fucking giant. Yeah, and he was a clever fighter. He could throw a jab that would put many of us on the floor. He threw different styles of jab. And I remember, again, talking about the corner and Tyson's corner, when he beat Tyson in 2001. It's about round 7 and Tyson's face is a mess. And the corner is saying, just get in there behind the jab. And Tyson's going, I can't. Just couldn't do it. So for the ferocity of that jab and for the fact he was a smart fighter who did beat everybody who was up against him, Lennox Lewis would probably have to be up there as the best.
Here's the asterisk by that one. He won a gold medal in the Olympics. It went for Britain.
Yeah. Again, well, we don't want to do the whole thing of what's British or what's not, but I remember he was raised here, then he went to Canada.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, would he? I mean,
that's what I have more of a problem with, to be honest with you, because it's like you won a gold medal for someone else. I go, ugh.
Yeah, but they moved to Canada, so we came back. I mean, Canada. That's almost Britain, mate. You go to Canada, it feels like Britain in 1953.
Does it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Fair enough.
Canada.
Take that. He's back on the firm. He's back. My pick would have been Joe Calzaghe, I think.
I was going to say Calzaghe. Calzaghe was an amazing fighter in that. He seemed to injure a hand quite early on. Yeah, and he fought that way. But again, I'm with you. I get it. I get the whole thing. I'll never go ahead and diss the guy. But you can't remember too many great Calzaghe tear-ups.
If you're going to point to one, you've got to go for, well, 2, sorry. The tear-up one would be Kessler, and in terms of they pulled it together, and obviously his big one was the Jeff Lacey fight, where he was,
that was amazing fight,
That was probably the peak of his power. He was brilliant. But
and again against Roy Jones Jr. when he fought him.
Yeah, Roy was finished, I think, at that point.
He was.
Right? Roy was gone. But the other one, the honourable mention I'll go is Naz. I think Naz in his day was a fantastic fighter, Prince Nassim.
But he had that style, okay, that Brendan England style with the hands down, all right, which is okay whenever you're a certain age against people who ain't that good. Yeah, I got to say I could never stand the guy. All right, and, the way he treated Steve Robinson was fucking horrible. I'm sure he can be a very decent guy, in face to face. Many people can, but in the ring, he was a bit of a tosser. There was no reason to humiliate Steve Robinson that way. And when he fought Barrera. All right, that's probably the best 15 quid I ever spent, and I think many people in the British boxing public felt the same way too. I was friends with a bunch of Americans at the time. I still had a proper job in those days, and they would say, "How come you guys all seem to be so happy that your guy got beat?" Because it's Naz. Yeah, and also he fought. I mean, Barrera was the first really good guy he fought.
But it's interesting you say that. He beat Junior Jones, didn't he? He knocked out Junior Jones, who had knocked out Barrera twice. So it's like timing, I think, plays into it too. Styles play into styles, of course, come into it. But he's, I think in his day, he was certainly, I know what you're saying with the personality, but I think when you look at it in hindsight, like I was a bit young to watch it as it was happening, do you know what I mean? So I've seen the fights almost without the emotional attachment later, if that makes sense. So when you just see the fight and not the nonsense around it, I think he was, you know.
Oh yeah, for a short time, he's a very effective fighter, and he made that style work. It's not a style I particularly like. And many people like that guy Pele Reid, who came from kickboxing into boxing. He fought that way against Orville Norris and got taken out in seconds. Yeah, that was a fucking stupid move.
Yeah.
But to a certain extent, you can't divorce the personality from it.
You can't.
Whenever he fought Barrera, he was completely bereft of ideas. He went into that extremely sideways on defensive southpaw there, so he took out this side of his body completely. He took out the left, so he didn't have anything much afterwards.
He kept getting caught, didn't he, off balance, and he was it wasn't a good night for this.
To a certain extent, he came to believe in his own greatness, and he neglected some of the more technical aspects of the sport. Like when you look at Tyson, when Tyson began, good head movement. People said he was a bit like Joe Frazier, but with better defence. Yeah. Now, again, we're talking about great pound for pounds of all time. If you take into account the fact that Joe Frazier was blind in one eye, that makes him a quite
couldn't straighten his left arm as well. Have you heard that one? Couldn't straighten his left arm properly. That's why he had the left hook.
Yeah, and the left hook was one of the great weapons of all time. Again, Frazier. Yeah, I could probably... Can I revise that opinion? Would I make Joe Frazier the best pound for pound of all time? Because he did give us some of the best fights ever. The Thriller in Manila, which I'm sure you have seen. I find that a very interesting fight, technically, if nothing else, because Ali, was a headhunter. You struggle to find Ali ever throwing a body punch.
Yeah, right.
So Frazier would come in, throw something, O'Neill cover, and then come in and throw. And the O'Neill cover seems to have gone from boxing these days because the Latin style has taken over and you get a lot more body shots. But the O'Neill cover is something that we teach a hell of a lot because it's a good cover that allows for some good non-boxing style applications afterwards.
Yeah.
But I find that fight fascinating. I watch it about 2 or 3 times a year.
Do you?
And at the end, but I'm still saying at the end, don't throw the fucking towel in now. Yeah, don't throw the towel in. And Eddie Fudge says, all right, I'd seen 8 guys die in the ring. Yeah. And by that time, Joe could not see. Yeah. And he was fucked. He did it at 9:30 in the morning in some sports hall.
Yeah, some craziness.
It was about 95 degrees outside with no air conditioning.
Right.
And they were both fighters that had taken some batterings and were past the best, but they produced possibly the best boxing spectacle ever. That's a question for you. Best boxing fight ever. Best fight ever. Your desert island fight. Which fight would you take with you?
If I could only watch one, I know it doesn't go far, but the one I'd watch, I say that, I was going to say Hagler Hearns, right? For what goes on. I mean, you could go to your Gatty Wards and things like that, right? If you want blood and guts. It's a hard question because as soon as I go to answer it, my mind goes, what about that one, whatever. Yeah. But I mean, if I can only watch one, I think I'd go Hagler Hearns.
Hagler Hearns, but it's a short one. That's
short
the problem.
One, yeah.
But in terms of pound for pound, that's the best fight.
I think I'd go for that one.
Absolutely amazing. You notice in that one, Hagler never takes a backward step.
Never does.
Never did. I don't even move to the side much. No. Just completely relentless going forward. And in terms of moving from orthodox into southpaw, Hagler was fucking amazing.
Seamless, he was brilliant. I'll tell you what, I'll expand that a little bit because we're talking about boxing. But if you ask me the best fight I've ever seen, I'd go for a UFC fight, and it was Yuri Prohaska versus Glover Teixeira. Have you seen that one?
No.
So it was about, I want to say, somewhere in the last 3 to 5 years, somewhere like that. Light heavyweight fight. Yuri Prohaska was about 29. Glover Teixeira, I think, was 42. Was the champion, and they just had a fight that was madness. There's a few mistakes in it, but like ended up with a 5th round submission at the end. But it was just like insanity. Watch that one. I'll send you the clip.
Yeah, I'll check that one out.
That was one that at the time I remember watching it. You know, when you just like when the fight ends, you're almost exhausted yourself. You're like, that was a mad fight. That was the one I'd pick as my best fight, just to add to it. But mate, listen, this has been brilliant.
I really appreciate it. What team I support?
Yeah, we're gonna get here. That's the last thing I always ask. I said this has been brilliant. Now I get to the most important question of the day. This decides whether we stay friends. We'll see. But which football team do you support, my man?
These days, all right, and again they say you can't change a team, but circumstances sometimes dictate. Yeah, this area is quite near Mill. I used to live in Broccoli. So
don't do this to me.
I know.
Don't do it to me.
Yeah, so we got to Millwall quite a bit in the late 80s and the early 90s. Then I basically met the girl who is now my wife and had kids. So stopped going for a long time. Also, I dislike intensely the new den. We talked about atmosphere of football. The old den. Did you ever go to the old den, Coldblow Lane? Yeah. It was intimidating. It was fucking horrible in many ways. But it was a proper football ground. And it was a good laugh. Not so much anymore. It's a much more serious thing right now. And the atmosphere against Norwich, partly because the game was fucking terrible and Millwall played terribly, was dead. What was interesting though, and this gets back to how football was changed, they had a black referee. All right, and the referee did do a couple of decisions against Millwall, which were an outrage. All right, and they were quite right to question the guy's eyesight and were you on your fucking phone at the time, referee? But there was no racial abuse of the guy, which wouldn't have happened a few years ago.
Right.
Yeah, so things have changed from that point of view. The club's done a lot of good work in that way. So I do enjoy going down there. I dislike the Premiership for all sorts of reasons. I just hate the fact that it's all about the dough. Yeah, Arsenal was my first team when I came down here. With Arsenal, Arsenal fans can't get all fucking highfalutin with Chelsea about this. It's all about having a big donut. And I remember a few years ago, it was on the radio. I think it was when West Brom were in the first division or the Premiership. And it was a terrible game between Aston Villa and West Brom. And the commentator said, I can't believe I'm watching this. And this is a game between the 15th and 16th wealthiest clubs in the planet. Yeah, because it was still a dreadfully dire game of football. Yeah, when you look at some of the quality of football now and the lack of personalities in the game. All right, except we talked about Zola earlier before. What a fucking player he was.
Unbelievable.
I wonder, would he survive? Would he get the game in today's regimented sort of game? Anyway, that's another story, another podcast.
That might be episode 2, mate. We get episode 2 in.
I'm very happy to do it. I enjoyed the chat. Hope you did.
Absolutely. And as I said, mate, I definitely want to come down and do a session with you, so we'll definitely stay in touch, mate. Hopefully we get Leo on too.
Definitely get Leo on.
We'll share some more stories. But, mate, as I say, this has been brilliant. I really appreciate your time and thanks for having me down, mate. I always finish with a fist up like this. Squeeze the neck. Boom!